It is true that nature and nurture have joined together to impose upon me an imposition of thoughts from other people or circumstances that I am not good enough. Whether it's nurture, my parents, bullies, school, a learning disability, where the environment has said to me, I'm not measuring up. That's the nurture has told me I'm not good enough. Or whether it's nature, whether I'm born that way. My temperament is very sensitive to criticism, sensitive to trauma, sensitive to emotions. And I feel so badly when someone says, you can do better, that's my nature. So therefore, nurture and nature have combined together or conspired together to lead to me feeling not good enough. However, and here is the clicker, the issue is I have to take responsibility for my own sense of self, my own thoughts and feelings, and I can emerge from this imposed negativity and saying that I'm not good enough by saying I am good enough. This is the robust core sense of self that we've been discussing to be able to combat this negativity. And this is called a CBT, a cognitive behavioral approach to the inner critic of saying I'm not good enough. Nature and nurture may have imposed upon me this feeling, but I personally have bought into it. My psyche, my subconscious, my inner self has said, yeah, you know what? You're right. I'm not good enough. I bought into it, and that is my responsibility. Maybe not as a child, because I did not have an ability to reflect on myself as a child. A child only reflects the feedback he gets or she gets from her environment or her parents. So therefore, if I'm told I'm not good, so I learn I'm not good. And I have to buy into that as a child, because if I don't believe what they're saying to me, that I'm not good enough, then I won't eat. I won't survive. I won't get food and shelter. And therefore, I have to believe the people around me saying to me that you're not good enough. However, that's when I'm 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But when I'm 15 or 25 or 35, then I have to take responsibility for my thoughts and my feelings and say, 1 second here. Is this true? This is called cognitive behavioral therapy, a CBT response to this built up sense of internal identity that I have formed, that I have bought into, and now I have to transform it. I have to emerge from it. And we're going to learn the technique called the CBT response to the inner critic saying, I'm not good enough. So the first thing we have to say to the inner critic when it says to us, you're not good enough, we say, just a second here, I'm not good enough for what? To be an astronaut? Well, maybe so. I don't want to be an astronaut. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a botanist. I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm not a person who dreams to be a pilot. I'm not good enough to be an astronaut. You're right. That's right. But I'm good enough to be a writer. I'm good enough to be a computer analyst. I'm good enough to be a salesperson. I'm good enough to be a marketing person. I'm good enough to be a graphic designer. But yes, that's right. I'm not good enough to be an astronaut. That's right. So the first thing I have to do is check the facts. The facts are that, yes, that's right. I'm not good enough to be an astronaut. If it says to me, my voice says to me, you're not good enough to be a father. 1 second here. 1 second. Let's take an inventory of my strengths. Pull out your wheel of strengths that we filled out in part 2 of this workshop series. And let's take a look at this wheel of strengths and see, is it true that I'm not good enough to be a father? Well, let's see. I have the intellect. I am a problem solver. Social skills, I can talk to people. I can empathize. Personality, I am a caring person and help people. Spirituality, I'm a person who feels bonded to my family. Family person, I can take out the garbage and be responsible. Personal growth, I'm becoming a better father, better husband. So 1 second here, check the facts. The facts are, when I look at my wheel of strengths, And I counteract, I respond to, I cognitively and behaviorally respond to the thoughts, the inner critic, and say, that's not true. I may not be good enough to be an astrophysicist. I may not be good enough to be a surgeon. I don't want to be a surgeon. I'm not good at being a surgeon, but I'm good to be a business person. I can be an Amazon salesperson. I can sell things. I can open up a business, but I'm not good enough. Yes, I'm not good enough to be a surgeon. I don't have the skill. I don't have the scientific background. I'm not interested in science. I can't stand the sight of blood. I don't want to be a surgeon. You're right. I'm not good enough to be a surgeon. But what am I good enough to be? I have to take a personal strengths inventory and say, I am good enough to be who I can be. I'm good enough to activate and actualize the skills that I do have. So therefore, I have to discern, respond to the inner critic and say, I'm good enough for what I am good at. There are two dimensions of self-esteem: inner value, intrinsic value, and worth. I'm worthy of being here in this world. And the second is competence. I am able to function in this world and to perform functions and be responsible and earn money to support my family, support myself. So we've just said that we could respond to the dimension of capabilities. You're not good enough to be an astronaut with our wheel of strengths. Now, what about when the critic says to you, you're not a good person, you're not valuable? So we take out our list of cognitive distortions, and there are 8 cognitive distortions. So when the inner critic says to me, you're not a good person, you're not a person of value, you're not worthy, I say to him, worthy of what? I'm not worthy of love, not worthy of living, not worthy of respect. I have to answer that thought. That's a CBT approach. And then I scientifically go through the 8 cognitive distortions that are embedded in that thought by saying, you're not good, you're not a good person. Really? Let's see. Let's look at these 8 distortions. Number 1, all or nothing. Is that an all or nothing statement? You're not a good person, which means I'm not valuable at all. I'm completely irredeemable, no good, terrible, evil. How can that be? There's no such thing as all or nothing. I'm gray. Sometimes I'm good, sometimes I'm bad. There are some things that I'm good at, some things that I'm not so good at. But to say I am not a good person is all or nothing, and that's a distortion because it's not true. There is no such thing as all or nothing or black and white. Second, overgeneralization. Is that an overgeneralization to say you are not good at anything? Let's say I didn't take out the garbage. Does that mean I'm a bad husband? So I overgeneralize from not taking out the garbage to I'm a bad person. Whose responsibility is that not to overgeneralize? It's mine. If I say I didn't take out the garbage, I made a mistake, I missed the garbage, I overslept, but doesn't make me a bad husband. It's just an overgeneralization. That is a distortion. To overgeneralize from I didn't take out the garbage to I'm a bad person, a bad husband, is a distortion, is looking at my negatives and maximizing my negatives. That's a distortion because I'm not maximally negative. If I look at things negatively and I look at all my bad points, then that's a distortion because I'm not all bad. If I minimize the positives, number 4, then that's a distortion because I'm minimizing the good in me. Those are cognitive distortions. 5, fortune telling. And I'll never be a good husband. I'm telling the future. I'm foretelling. I'm a prophet by saying, I'll never be good. I'll never redeem myself. I'll never become better. Well, prophecy ended at the Second Temple period. Therefore, we don't have prophecy anymore. And to foretell the future that I'm never going to improve, I'm never going to work on myself is not true. That's a distortion. Number 6, labeling. Labeling myself as a bad person or a bad father. I'm not good enough. I'm not good. I'm a bad person is a label, and people don't have labels. Labels belong on ketchup bottles, mustard bottles, but not on people. People are human beings who have good and bad or a mixture, and therefore I am not labeled. I can't label myself no good. 7, shoulda, woulda, coulda. I should have been better. I would have been better. I could. That's fantasy. I should have, I would have, I could have is a fantasy. If I say I should have been a better person, I should have done better, I could have done better. Well, that's a fantasy. I didn't do better. I did what I did, and now I can live in reality and fix it or repair it or come back and become a better person tomorrow. I cannot therefore fall prey to the distortion of should have, would have, could have. Shoulda, woulda, coulda is a distortion because it is fantasy. It's just not reality. A correct way of thinking in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is to stay with reality. And lastly, blaming other people or blaming myself, blaming others, blaming my parents or blaming my teachers or blaming myself, blaming others or blaming myself is a distortion because it's not reality. The reality is I made a mistake. Let's deal with it. Let's deal with the facts on the ground. As Dragnet would say, just the facts, ma'am, just the facts. But I can't deal with blame. What's that going to get for me? That's a distortion. So all of these 8 statements, let's see, you're not good enough. Is it all or nothing thinking? Yep. Overgeneralizing from one mistake to everything? Yes. Am I maximizing the negatives? Yes. Minimizing the positives? Yes. Fortune telling, saying I'll never be better? Yes. Labeling myself no good? Yep. Shoulda, woulda, coulda, I should have been better? Yep. Blaming myself or blaming others? Yep. That statement, you're not good enough, is violating these 8 scientific principles brought by Beck and by Burns of what are the cognitive distortions which lead to depression. And therefore, if we change this statement of I'm not good enough, then we can start living in reality. What is the correct statement? The correct statement is I made a mistake and I'll do better next time. If I say that to myself, instead of saying to myself, you're no good, you're a bad person, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, then I will change my inner core, my inner sense of self. I will learn to change my inner view of self, my inner perception of self, my inner subconscious identity. And that's the key. I have to change my own identity, change who I see myself as. I've seen myself as not good enough. I lived under that for 10 years, 15, 30 years. And I've been prey to the imposition of my nature and nurture, of other people saying to me and events conspiring to tell me that I'm not good enough. But if I use CBT and I use my wheel of strengths and say, is that true? No, it's not true. I have strengths. And are those statements of no good? Are they true? If I use my list of cognitive distortions and go through them and say, is it true that I'm not good enough? Let's analyze it scientifically with a scientific method. It is not true. What is true? What is true is that I have a wheel of strengths that tell me that I have talent in intellect, social skills, personality, character, spirituality, contribution to family, and personal growth. And therefore, I can change my own inner perception of self.